Hey, good afternoon. This is Rich Lyles. I'm the program. I'm the program manager for the Wyoming PTAC, and I am today. I'm going to be here talking about the topic of surety bonding. And bear with me because I'm still kind of new at this, so I get some interesting messages sometimes here on my phone. I'm trying to figure out what they are to make sure I'm actually broadcasting properly. But anyway, what I'd like to also start off by saying today is just basically welcome. Thank you for joining me. This is sponsored by the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce. There are 22 at noon sessions. And let's talk about surety bonding today. So let's see. Most of the audience here that I'm probably talking to is probably small businesses. And as a result, there are certain issues and struggles that small businesses have when dealing with surety bonds, especially on public contracts. Basically, a contract surety bond is a form of credit, and a lot of times small businesses may struggle to qualify for the bonding due to limited capital, credit capacity, whatever the case may be. It's a lot harder for smaller businesses to oftentimes go through the bonding process than it is for larger businesses that already have a lot of that in place. That's not to say that that small businesses can't have surety bonds set in place, and that's actually the goal to get to that point. And we'll talk about that a little bit here over the next approximately 20 minutes. Basically, what I want to do this morning, and excuse me one second. What I want to do this morning is I'm going to start off by talking about the four basic types of bonds. I'm going to talk about the situation that bonds are required in, and then I'm going to kind of shift focus and talk a little bit about the SBA bid bond guarantee program and how that's beneficial for small businesses. So to start off with, basically four types of bonds. The bid bond, let's start off with that one. A bid bond basically is something that you would submit at the time of the bid, and it guarantees that you're going to supply basically the required performance and payment bonds to secure the contract if you're once that award process is complete. Second type of bond is going to be a performance bond, and basically that's going to let the owners or the managers of the project, it's going to guarantee you're going to successfully complete that project, essentially in accordance with the contract terms and conditions that are set forth in that agreement. Now, a third type of bond is a payment bond, and basically what a payment bond does is is that essentially guarantees that you're going to pay your subcontractors. It's going to so basically pay all your labor and material suppliers for their work on the job, etc. And then a fourth type of bond is a maintenance bond, and basically that's going to guarantee that you'll remedy any defects in workmanship materials within a specified time period, following the job completion, and that will be set forth in whatever parameters that may be. So anyway, those are the basic four types of bonds. Now, a question that a lot of people have is why are surety bonds required? And basically to guarantee that contracts are properly completed, in a nutshell. For public entities, specifically the federal government, the provisions of the Miller Act basically require that any construction contract that's over $150,000 under the provisions of the Miller Act require that a bond has to be in place. Now, state, county, local governments, they have some similar requirements, but they're referred to, we refer to those basically as quote unquote little Miller Acts, because they have a lot of the same provisions as the Miller Act, the federal requirement. It's just that the limits are different and some of the provisions are a little bit different. And of course, in the private sector owners often require surety bonds as well. So the thing is, check your project and specifications. Now, what I'm going to focus on for the rest of the time that I have here mainly is is going to be with federal government requirements. So basically, I just want to mention that becoming bondable is really similar in process to obtaining bank credit. You set up initial bonding with a surety agent, and that may take a few weeks. The one thing you want to definitely do is pre-qualify so that you know what your bonding capacity is before bidding. And specifically to know your bonding capacity, you want to know, you want to have this set up so you know two basic things. You want to know the single contract limit, and then you want to know what your aggregate amount is. So, a single contract limit, for example, could be, I don't know, $500,000, but your aggregate might be $3 million or $4 million or whatever the case may be. So, just quickly in a nutshell, basically determining your bonding capacity, it's basically it's tied to your working capital, and it's essentially calculated from your balance sheet. And generally what's going to happen is you're going to take your cash equivalents, and add your accounts receivable and subtract your current liabilities, and that gives you available working capital. Now, generally speaking, the available working capital times about a factor of times 10 is essentially your estimated bonding capacity. However, if you go with the SBA's bond guarantee program, a couple of things change. The first thing is that the SBA counts available bank lines of credit in addition to the in addition to your working capital. So they're going to take your working capital, add your lines of credit, and or at least the available amount of your lines of credit, I should say, and they're going to essentially multiply that by 20 as opposed to 10 to get your estimated bonding capacity with the SBA. So, so generally speaking, what it does is it really doubles, slightly more than doubles your the amount of bonding that you have. So like a rule of thumb is that it's generally typically about twice that of traditional, going through a traditional method. Let's see. So the SBA, I was talking about this for just a second. The SBA has a bid bond guarantee program, and I think a lot of people, a lot of companies out there are really familiar with the loan guarantee program, and that the SBA, you can apply for certain loans and have a portion of that, up to a certain percentage of that loan, guaranteed by the Small Business Administration, which of course reduces the amount of risk, so lenders are able to potentially fund projects that they may not otherwise, might be a little bit outside their risk envelope, for example. The same thing's true of bonding, and so the Small Business Administration will guarantee a certain portion of that bond in case there's a default or a problem with it. And I'll touch on those limits a little bit more here in a few minutes if we have time. But what I'd like to talk about is the qualifications to participate in that particular process with the SBA. So just to give you a few of them here, businesses must be a U.S. entity, and they must be organized for profit. The owners must be legal U.S. citizens or resident. Business owners have to be able to have the ability, this is basically what the regulations say, have to have the ability to be eligible to do business with the federal government, which basically in a nutshell means that you're not debarred from doing business with the federal government, you're not on that debarred list. Also, business owners can't be involved in a current bankruptcy proceedings. However, you can become eligible almost immediately after the discharge date. So if you do have a bankruptcy in the past, don't let that completely derail you from doing this process. It's really it's not an automatic disqualifier, is what I'm saying. Another requirement is that businesses will have to be current on their taxes or their repayment agreements. And I have companies that have come to me and say, well, I got behind on my 941 taxes, and 941 taxes are payroll taxes. It's out of all the type of taxes, that's the one that most businesses, if they're going to have a problem with them, that's the one that pops up the first. So, and it's fairly common. It happens noticeably amount. And they say, okay, well, I owe how many hundreds or thousands of dollars, hopefully not hundreds of thousands, but however many thousands of dollars I owe, and I'm in a current repayment agreement with, with Treasury, or specifically the IRS. And one thing to keep in mind is if you do have a repayment agreement and you're current on that repayment agreement, you're still qualified to participate in the bonding program. So don't let that be a deterrent for you. And the last thing is basically the company has to be unable to secure a bid, performance, or payment bond, or be unable to secure it on reasonable terms. So if you meet those basic 5 qualifications I just talked about, then you should be able to qualify. That's from a personal standpoint. Now, to qualify for the SBA's bid bond guarantee program, not only do you and your company have to qualify, but the contract has to qualify as well. And basically, there's 3 categories. And the first one is what's called a quick app, and that's for jobs, I believe, up to $400,000. It's essentially a 2-page application. You can get a decision within a few hours, and generally speaking, no financial statements are required from the SBA. The second category is for contracts of up to $6.5 million, and these can be any contract type. They can be federal, state, local, can be even private industry. So, you can apply for contracts up to $6.5 million for basically any contract type, any purpose. If your contract is a little bit larger, though, you say, wait a second, what if I have an $8 million contract with Department of Energy or the Air Force or whichever public entity? The contract can still qualify under the SBA's bid bond guarantee program up to 10, if the contract size is up to $10 million and it's on a prime contract. However, there's a little bit more involved if this happens. The contracting official on that particular contract is going to have to send a certification and otherwise coordinate it with the SBA. But keep in mind that if it's on a federal prime contract, the bonding limit of the potential limit of the program is $10 million. Okay, so basically, what do you need to apply? With the exception of the Quick app, you're going to need business financial statements, basically the last 3 fiscal year, and you're going to want at least interim financial statements, and I believe at least on a semi-annual basis, so a 6-month interim. You're going to also be required to submit personal financial statements on the principals and their spouses. You're going to need a bank reference letter, specifically detailing the bank line of credit if you have one. You're going to have to fill out a statement of personal history, which is SBA Form 912. You only basically do that once, so you only have to redo that if you have an ownership change. That's kind of like a one and done sort of thing. And then the actual form itself to apply for the surety bond guarantee assistance is SBA Form 994. So you'll have to fill that out, and you're going to have to fill that out every single time that you have a bond request. So that would be, you do that every single time. And of course, this is not 100% comprehensive. Some additional information may be required based on individual circumstances of the particular bond or contract. So I have some people also ask me, are there fees? Well, the easy answer to that is on a bid bond through the SBA guarantee program, there's no fee for the bid. That's just for the bid bond. Now, for performance and payment bonds, there are fees. The contractor has a fee that they're going to have to pay directly to the SBA, and that's 0.729% of the contract amount. So it's just slightly under 0.75%. Now, for the surety bond premium, that can run anywhere between 1.8 and 3% of the contract amount, and that's going to be paid directly to the bonding agent. And it's going to vary by state, vary by company, so just you have to ask the agent. And the reason I mention this is that these are real costs associated with this project. So just make sure that that when you're bidding, that you include that in the in your bid estimates. So you have this application process, and basically it works like this at a real basic level. The business is going to seek bonding from an SBA authorized agent. And there's a place in the website, on SBA's website, where you can actually go and get a list of those agents within each state. Then that agent, once the small business seeks the bonding from the agent goes through a process and seeks the bonding approval from, I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. The agents are actually with the SBA. So then the SBA, the agent, actually seeks the approval from the bonding partner, the surety company. And then from there, the agent submits the bond guarantee application to the SBA. And then once it's approved, the agent will issue the bond to the small business. So it's basically a process that goes like that. There's a list of authorized bonding agencies that you can get from the SBA's website. It's the address is www.sba.gov /O as in Oscar, S as in Sam, G as in George. So to reiterate, that's www.sba.gov /OSG. And so you can go and you can find that information out there at that website. Now, the surety bond guarantee program for the SBA is basically broken down into three areas. Basically, an East Coast, a Central U.S., and a West Coast. Here in Wyoming, I know a lot of times with working with federal agencies, we're used to dealing with Denver office. Ironically, for this, the Denver office is actually a different region than we are. In Wyoming, the area office that we deal for this is actually in Seattle. And if you'd like contact information for that, that's something that you can contact me, and I will also give this information to the Cheyenne Chamber so they can post this information on their site as well. And I'll also give contact information for me at the end of the presentation. So basically, that's bonding in a nutshell. Now, what I'm planning to do is we have some other, we're doing these 22 at noon live sessions, and we're planning to follow these up with full-length webinars or live presentations. And just tentatively right now, I've got this on my calendar here somewhere. Tentatively right now, we're looking at the larger, more in-depth presentation on bonding to occur on January 30th, which is a Wednesday, probably sometime in the early afternoon. We're still working those dates and times out. We're going to do these. We're going to do these throughout. Starting in January and finishing up in May sometime. We have 9 of them on the list, and as soon as that's finalized, that information will be disseminated, and the information we give to the Cheyenne Chamber, where they will post it on their website or on Facebook and various and sundry locations, and disseminate that to their groups, and as will we. And basically, for that particular upcoming webinar, I'm planning to basically do an introduction and then have either the SBA and or a bonding company actually take you through the specifics and the parameters. We're going to go much more in depth into this whole process. It's probably going to be about a 60 to 90 minute presentation, and like I said, tentatively scheduled for January 30th right now. But stay tuned for updates from the Chamber website and also from their Facebook postings as we finalize these dates and times. So that's basically what's planning. That's what we're planning on now with bonding or with the topic that I presented last week, with the 2 minutes or so that I have left here. Last week we did introduction to government contracting. So anything along the line of intro to government contracting, which we're planning to do a full-length presentation on tentatively January 16th, which is also a Wednesday, in a webinar format, where we're going to cover in-depth registering in SAM, getting a DUNS number, setting up your profile in the dynamic small business search, et cetera, and sources of information, Fed Biz Ops, how to go out and find solicitations, how to market your company to the federal government specifically, and state and local governments as well, and that will be January 16th. But stay tuned for those. We will have a series here January through May, and just to recap, bonding, something every small business needs to know, is something that's going to be required on every federal contract greater than $150,000. It's going to be required on the subcontracts for large prime contracts. Part of the Miller Act, if you want to look that up, you can read the actual provisions in law. If you're having insomnia, that's actually a really good thing to do. And there's a lot of other information available on it that's written in more layman's terms. So anyway, so bonding, something to know more about, and we will get much more in-depth information on it. Now, once again, my name is Rich Lyles, and anybody who has any questions or wants to have further discussion on this, feel free to contact me. My number here at the PTAC offices in Casper is area code 307-343-0765. That number again, 307-343-0765. And the also my email is rlyles, so R and then my last name Lyles, at uwyo.edu, so universitywyoming.edu, UWYO. So I have a couple of questions, and let's see, somebody asked, how long does it take to actually increase your bonding capacity? If you go through the SBA's bond guarantee program, it's actually going to take a few weeks. It's usually not something that can be done in just a few days or a few hours. It's something that you're going to need to plan for a little while ahead of time. Now, if you're talking about the Quick app and you're going from maybe 25,000 to 50,000, the lead times will actually be a lot shorter. But if you're up above that 400,000 range, especially count on it being a few weeks. I would say count on being 5 to 6 weeks plus. I mean, it could take longer, it could happen a little sooner, but figure on that amount of time. So with that, looks like we're at about 22 and a half minutes according to my watch, which means that I'm hitting my 22 limit, and that is it for this week. Tune in next week, where I will be talking about teaming arrangements, especially in how they relate to the socioeconomic program. So subcontracting and teaming arrangements. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and feel free to send any questions my way that you may have, and also thank you to the Cheyenne Chamber for setting this up. Have a good afternoon.